February 16th, 1988. I understand that Moshen's death was a necessity. I know that the risk of him selling off the microfilm was far too great. The Institute had to act. The Institute had to make sure that no one else would try to steal from it. I understand that Moshen's death was a necessity, but it has made my life unbearable. The explosion has brought far too much attention to the city. My one supplier of calm has been incinerated in a bomb blast, and the increased military presence in the streets has sent all the other black marketeers into hiding. The official story is some French group of freedom fighters decided to make their point for independence by blasting through civilian housing. I doubt that even the soldiers on the street believe the rationale behind their posting, yet no one questions the narrative. Those that would challenge the party have long been taken care of before I arrived at this cursed corner of the globe. Without the chemical aids, I cannot sleep. Without something to dull my mind, something to draw a line between my life as a scientist and my life as a man, I fear that I will go mad. There is no respite from thoughts of my research. Every night my fingers draw blood from my palms in desperate attempts at relaxation. I beg my mind to forget about the Institute, to let go for a mere second of the dizzying forbidden knowledge that I have been made privy to. All I hear in response are the wails of the morning siren. Without the soothing burn of the liquor, without the weightlessness of the hashish, I fear I will go insane. There's only so much reality a man's mind can handle before collapsing in on itself. I need release. The streets below my window rumble with the passing of military vehicles, but beneath the heavy machinery, I hear something else. From somewhere deep within the concrete structures, I hear the sounds of shouts and drunken song. I hear the vagrants. They have always frightened me. Their tattered clothes, their filthy bandages, the cruel streets that have imprinted themselves into the geometry of their faces. I have always feared that they would beat me and rob me if they ever had the chance. I still hold on to that fear. I am still terrified that the drunken voices in the night will cause me harm, but I have no other choice. My hands shake, but they do not shake from fear. They shake from the thirst. I need release. February 17th, 1988. My fears were not ill placed. Last night, as I sought the sweet release of alcohol, I was robbed. They did not cause me harm, and they did not take more money than the liquor was worth, but the vagrants did threaten me with the possibility of violence. Finding a crowd was not difficult. The drunken arguments and melancholic songs were easy to follow through the quiet night. The makeshift fire barrels of the vagrants were set up just a stone's throw away from the collapsed apartment building. The purchase of the alcohol was straightforward as well. As soon as I vocalized my intent to purchase some liquor, an unlabeled bottle of murky liquid was brought to me out of the shadows. Even the price that was quoted was reasonable. It wasn't until the money had changed hands and I tried leaving with the alcohol that problems arose. The man who handled the transaction asked to have a sip of the liquor before I left. I was not comfortable with sharing the drink, but the stranger's tone left little room for negotiation. When he was done with his taste, he didn't give the bottle back. He simply passed it to the man next to him. In very few words, the group made it clear that if I was to purchase liquor from them, I was to drink it in their company. I was strongly opposed to drinking with the crowd of vagrants, but one taste from the bottle changed my mind. The drink was just as strong as the gin Moshen peddled. A single burning gulp washed away all of the tension that had built up over the sleepless night since the explosion. It did not take long to negotiate other forms of relaxation from the spokesman of the vagrants. I spent the night by the fire, accompanied by a mute old man with pale blue eyes. His coat was just as torn as the others, and his face carried countless scars of lost battles, yet he seemed happy. As I sat next to him, stifling any shred of sobriety with liquor and drugs, he stared into the fire and smiled. The air smelled of burnt plastic, and many of the souls that warmed themselves by the flames looked like they were not long for this world, but any thoughts of my discomforting situation eventually faded away beneath the mystery of the old man's joy. I am drunk. I am drunk and tired, but my soul is at peace. My eyes are closing. Soon the sirens will order me to work. I should get some sleep. March 1st, 1988. My hands are strained with exhaustion and my mind is flogged with the chemical relaxants I have consumed, but for the first time, in a long time, I find myself nearing some semblance of contentment. I am making progress in my research. Not only am I starting to understand the processes behind the shaman's tape's ability to seize the viewer's physical body, I am also starting to find hints about how the process could be reversed. The footage of the mystic's performance is still haunting. It still chills my bones with its potential for destruction, yet somewhere beyond the horror, I see opportunity. The mechanisms behind the film reel can bring forth a horrible reality for our species, but if its power is harnessed properly, the potential is limitless. The subjects of the footage do not age. They exist simultaneously wherever copies of the film reel exist, trapped in a timeless loop of the discomforting performance. Yes, those present in Reel XO422 are clearly suffering, but their anguish is not in vain. The forbidden technology that is the source of their pain can be utilized for the good of humanity. All that is required is extensive research. Research which I am willing to commit my entire existence to. My work at the Institute has become considerably easier over the past couple of weeks. Having some place to go after my shift is finished, having a time within the day when I can let go of all thoughts of my work. It has made the harrowing reality of my existence bearable. My relationship with the vagrants is on good enough terms where I think they would let me consume my chemical aids in private, yet I still choose to sit with them by the fire. It might be force of habit. It might be the fear of being proven wrong about the nature of our relationship, but I suspect that the main reason why I continue to sit with the vagrants is the social contact. I do not converse with them. All of the early attempts at small talk would ultimately lead to inquiries about my work. Those conversations would be dangerous to have at any rate, let alone with a crowd of drunken strangers. No, I do not speak with the vagrants. I simply sit by the fire and listen. I sit by the fire and listen to their stories, their songs, their hopes for a brighter future. I sit by the fire and allow myself to forget, for at least a couple of minutes, about the United People's Institute of Science. The old man with the pale blue eyes sits next to me. He drinks and he smokes and he smiles. When I first met him, I thought that the constant expression of joy on his face was the byproduct of some form of mental retardation, and I still do not rule that possibility out, but the more I sit with him, the more I suspect that he has uncovered a secret that the rest of the group is not privy to. During the day, my mind is fully committed to the Institute, yet in the evenings, as the drugs and liquor push my thoughts from the realm of science to eccentric psychobabble, I found myself craving insight into the old man's mind. I long for the tranquility he lives in. I too want to smile and exist in utter peace. My time with the vagrants is not fully peaceful, however. Occasionally arguments break out among the men about politics or the use of the communal intoxicants. These disagreements are usually resolved quickly. Either the shouting drags on for long enough for both parties to grow uninterested in the argument, or the physical confrontation is so quick and decisive that the argument fades into history before the night is done. The peace of the vagrant gatherings is seldom disturbed by its members. It is the ranks of the state security that significantly dampen our evenings. They arrive in black cars with their headlights dimmed, hoping that we will not notice them. Usually we do. Even if we don't, there's far too many of us for the police to make a sizable amount of arrests. When the state security forces arrive, we all run into the night, hoping that we will not be the one arrested for liquor consumption. The visit from the black cars have gotten more common over the past few days, but I suspect they are simply the result of some bureaucrat trying to justify his paycheck. I am certain that soon enough, the state security incursions will become a rarity once more. Those that are in power know that the fight against liquor is a fight they can't win. Those that are in power know that we are simply the byproduct of a cruel country. I must go rest now. The hotel sirens await me. March 5th, 1988. Tragedy has struck. Tonight the state security officers came out in full force. There were no warnings, no chance to escape. Most of us didn't even have a chance to get up before we tasted the rubber batons of the police. As we were forced into the patrol vans, I tried explaining my position in the institute to one of the officers. In response to my pleas for freedom, he broke my nose and called me a social parasite. The cell that we were herded into smelled of mildew and vomit. There were cots, but sleep was impossible. Each of the beds squirmed with insect life that would bite and sting as soon as I found myself drifting off. The other men were vocal in their panic. They spoke of the cruel government, of work camps, of disappearing forever. The only person who did not seem to understand the magnitude of the situation was the old man with the blue eyes. He simply sat on one of the cots and smiled out into the ether. The bedbugs were crawling over him, and the passing guard would occasionally single him out for verbal abuse, but the man was impervious to his situation. He simply sat and smiled, as he always did. With sleep impossible, I spent most of my imprisonment watching the clock in the hallway. With each hour in custody, I became more certain that I would be kept from my shift at the institute. I knew what would happen if my post was left unattended. I knew not going to work meant death. Around 3 a.m, however, a familiar face showed up in the hallway. Dr. Markarov. His face showed no signs of recognition when I called out to him. He simply stood with the guards and pointed out half a dozen of my cellmates to be transferred to a different cell. The blue-eyed man was among those singled out. The old man's deafness to the guards' orders caused them to beat him. Even on the floor of a filthy jail cell, even with blood pooling around his lips, the old man continued to smile. Markarov did not acknowledge me in the slightest, yet about 30 minutes after he left, I was standing outside of the station. Apparently someone from the institute had contacted authorities and insisted on my immediate release. It was the guard who assaulted me who delivered the news. He apologized, twice, once when I was taken out of the cell and then again when I was let out of the police station. His first apology was rushed. The man merely admitted his guilt and asked for my forgiveness as he took me out of my cell. It wasn't until we were outside of the police station, free of the prying eyes of his co-workers and the jailed vagrants, that he started to beg. He said he had a family. He said he wasn't a violent man. He said he wouldn't have hurt me had he known that I was a member of the institute. I had no appetite for retaliation. I simply wanted to get back to my hotel room. I needed sleep. I still need sleep. There was less than an hour left before the hotel siren forced me to march to the institute once more. I should have gone to bed the moment I returned to my room, but sleep refuses to come. I worry that my clash with state security will have further repercussions, that my regular drinking circle will be dissolved, that I will go mad in my sober solitude. I fear what today will bring. This morning, as we made our way to the institute, I walked beside Markarov in hopes that he would speak to me, that he would give me some semblance of social contact to make sense of the previous night's events. He did not. The whole way to the institute, he pretended I did not exist, just as he had done the past couple of months. There was no mention of my arrest at work, no warnings, no inquiries, no repercussions. Up until lunch, my workday was no different from any other. I worked at unraveling the mysteries of the shaman tape, just as I had every day. When I made my way towards the elevator to eat lunch with the security guard, however, something was different. The main hall of the institute has always been silent. So silent, in fact, that you can hear the echoes of your own breath if you stand still in the middle of the cathedral structure. Today, however, I heard something else. I heard whimpering. Coming from one of the office doors at the ground floor, I heard whimpering. My initial instinct was to open a door and investigate, but that was just the byproduct of my sleep deprivation and substance withdrawal. I fought that instinct. I knew that the institute held secrets that were far too troubling for the mind to handle. With the little willpower I still had at my disposal, I forced myself to ignore the whimpering. I was ashamed of my callousness, of my lack of empathy for human suffering, yet I bit down on my sense of morality and made my way to the elevator. I managed to ignore the pleas for help. What I could not ignore was the banging on the door. I heard it just as I was about to enter the elevator. Faint taps on the door and even fainter pleas for help. The sounds were coming from the door next to the elevator. I couldn't ignore them, feeling my heartbeat in my throat. I opened that door. I saw a familiar face. It was the old man with the blue eyes who always smiled. Yet this time, he was not smiling, and his eyes were no longer blue. The man's face was stuck in a pain grimace. His arms were outstretched in a desperate plea for help. His blue eyes were gone. Instead, a throbbing mess of life pulsed inside of his skull. In broken Russian, he begged me for help. He begged for release from his suffering. He begged for death. I tried to reason with the man, yet he was deaf to my words. It was as if his skin was but a shell that housed some inhuman being. The raw red flesh behind his eyes was pulsing through the beats of a foreign heart. He seized me by my shoulders with his crooked fingers and pleaded for an end to his suffering. At first, I felt pity for the disfigured man, but that pity quickly turned to fear. The mass of flesh bubbling inside of his skull started to expand. Quivering tendrils of meat reached out for my eyes. I knocked the old man down and retreated towards the elevator, but he quickly got back to his feet. The strands of crimson that stemmed from his eyes continued to reach for me. His delirious speech soon became incomprehensible. The old man started to heave, producing tentacles of flesh from his throat with each guttural groan. I tried to get the elevator doors open. I tried getting away from the nightmare that was once my drinking partner, but the aim of the oozing limbs was singular. If Makarov would not have appeared, I do not know what those strands of flesh would have done to me. Yet Makarov did appear. Just as those corroded strands of flesh were centimeters away from my face, he leapt at the old man with some sort of an electric apparatus. With a single spark from the machine, the old man went limp. The smell of burnt flesh filled our immediate vicinity. For the first time in months, Makarov spoke to me. In no uncertain terms, he told me that my nightly drinks with the vagrants went against the rules of the Institute. He said that if I were ever to get caught again, he would not help me. He said that if I ever ended up in the custody of state security, I would meet the same fate as the blue-eyed man did. By the time I reached the guard shack, my appetite had disappeared completely. The security guard eagerly scarfed down the egg sandwich I had brought him. He happily ate the food I didn't have the stomach for as well. My mind wrestled with the image of the raw flesh, but by the time my shift was over, a different problem presented itself. The thirst. Moshin was dead. The vagrants were no longer an option. The presence of the military on the streets was still forcing all the black marketeers into hiding. All prospects for procuring my chemical crutches were gone. Yet the thirst remained. When I entered my room in the evening, however, I found a paper bag sitting on my bed. In it, there was a clear glass bottle of liquid and a set of syringes. The burning contents of the bottle were immediately familiar. A welcome rush of warmth spread through my body as soon as I took a sip. I do not know who left the supplies in my room. I do not know if they are trying to help me or mean me ill. I do not care. I need to stay sane. Without my chemical relaxants, my scientific work is unsustainable. I will report on the quality of the syringes tomorrow.